So a couple of years ago, I got one of these. This is the Hitbox controller from Hitbox Arcade, and I've been enjoying it ever since. I mainly play Dragon Ball Fighters. Sometimes I'll play Tekken, but mainly Dragon Ball. And because of that, the Razer Panthera that I got from 2018 has been sitting on a shelf ever since. I've always wanted to convert my Panthera into a stickless conversion, but I didn't make the move because I wanted to have a stick around just in case. Well, recently, a friend just gifted me this. This is the 8-Arc Onyx. Shoutouts to Mikey, by the way. And now that I had two sticks, I thought it was appropriate to do the conversion. In order to do that, I went through a vast amount of Reddit posts on our fight sticks to get any info, mainly on where to order parts, because I'm from Canada, and I genuinely don't know any places that do custom art and plexiglass, especially for conversion builds. My research eventually led me to order from Focus Attack, because that was really the best option for me at the time. And so I went ahead and downloaded their artwork template. I created my artwork template via Photopea, which is basically an online version of Photoshop, and is surprisingly very powerful tool. This one that you see here isn't the file that I sent, but rather it's the entire build of what I was looking to make. And after that, once I was satisfied with my layout, I ordered the parts only for the stickless bundle. I then went to Canadian Joysticks to order a set of soundwood buttons for the build, but they were out of stock for most of the ones that I wanted. So then, I proceeded to make another order on Focus Attack for the Sanwa parts. The weird thing is, with the conversion rate, shipping is virtually the same between the two for some reason. So that's basically it for the backstory. As you can see right now, I'm currently prepping the Panthera for the part replacement. That includes disconnecting all the wire connections and removing all the 30mm Sanwa buttons, and also the stick lever. After that, the next process was to remove the existing plexiglass. I used a heat gun for this, but if you don't have one around, you can also use a blow dryer. This was my first time removing plexiglass, and I would say it's the most difficult step to do, especially if you want to keep your original art. I made sure to try to heat the area evenly and pry off the plastic with a knife. Unfortunately, there were some parts that I didn't adequately heat, so when I tried pulling off the glass, I snapped the artwork into pieces, which was something I was bummed out about. The next step was to remove the functions panel off the top plate. This panel is where your start, select, touchpad, and L3, R3 buttons are. This step is pretty straightforward. You just need to remove all 6 screws that surround it and slide the panel out. There is no need to detach any wires, and you may just set it aside into the Panthera enclosure. Once that's done, I had to temporarily remove the left-hand plastic spacer bracket. The reason for this is to access the screw that holds the original panel in place. Once it's removed, I set the screw aside and reinstalled the plastic bracket as it originally was. Once you've done all that, we can now remove the top plate of the Panthera. In total, we have 8 screws that hold the top plate in place. You will find 6 on the outer edge, and an additional 2 where the latch button is located. These 2 screws are what keep the latch locked when you close the top panel. After all 8 screws have been removed, you may lift up the plate and set it aside. Before going through the next steps, I found some debris that was trapped under the panel for years. So I wiped it down and used compressed air to blow it all away. You may want to do the same. Remember those 2 screws that hold the latch and panel together? We're going to need to put them back on for our next step, which is to shave off some plastic at the top panel. The reason is that this bit of plastic may get in the way when installing your 24mm buttons. To locate the precise area, I put the new plexi cover over. To to see which button will be impacted. In most cases, if not all, it's going to be located to where your R1 button would be. I took a knife and scored a notch so that I could prepare which area will be shaved off using a Dremel tool. Afterwards, I put the new top plate on and had another pass for any potential obscurities. Once I found everything was a-okay, I carefully went to work. I just want to throw a disclaimer and remind you to wear the proper PPE when handling any, especially powered tools. You can see that I didn't even do the bare minimum, and I didn't wear work gloves or safety glasses. So please, when you're doing this, make sure to wear safety gear. After finishing with the Dremel tool, I saw that there were some jagged edges left. So I opened up the Panthera top panel and used the file to smooth out the remaining edges. So, assuming we haven't messed anything up at this point, we can finally start putting things back together. We'll start with the function panel. It's a straightforward process. Just reinsert the panel back to its place and tighten all 6 screws down. After this, we can finally throw on the new top plate and screw it into place. But first, I want to remind you to remove the 2 latch screws before doing anything else. Once you've finished, we can move on to the most exciting part, which is to get that artwork and plexiglass into place. There isn't much to this step. Just line up your artwork as best as you can, place the plexiglass on top, and secure it using the 4 hex screws which were included in your order. Next up, we're going to focus our attention into installing the power pass-through cable for the SOCD. We'll start with removing the PCB housing. There are 4 screws that you'll need to remove in order to expose the board. These are located on the front and back ends of the plastic housing. Once you've removed that, you're going to insert the large end of the SOCD power cable into the Panthera's PCB test pins. The orientation of the cable should be placed with the red wire located on top, and the black wire located on the bottom. Here's a photo that you can see for more detail. Feel free to pause. Once you're sure you've correctly inserted the cable into the correct pins, you can now reinstall the plastic board housing. For this next step, we can finally add the 24 and 30mm buttons. Before putting them in, I've modified my buttons with homemade silencing pads. Focus Attack didn't have 24mm silencing pads, and if they exist, I'm certainly not aware of it. So what I've done was cut up circles from an old t-shirt, small enough to fit the 24mm Sanwa buttons. And then I placed it between the button cap and switch. This step isn't necessary, so feel free to skip this portion, but I personally like using a more quiet pad. Here's a quick comparison of the reduced noise. It may not sound different, but in my opinion, you're going to hear a greater difference once they're snapped onto the top plate. Now that all of the buttons are finally placed, we'll need to open up the Panthera once more. For this next step, we'll be installing the SOCD board and wiring. These 2 items should be included in your order. We'll start with inserting the colored wires into their respective slots on the board. The red wire will go to the down slot, labeled D, orange to up, or U, yellow to L, or left, and green to R, or right. The black wire is your ground cable. I've placed it into the G slot, beside the right direction, or green. After that, we'll add the sticky padded feet on the SOCD board. As you can see, it's a pretty straightforward process. Just insert the plastic pins into the installation holes on the board. Next, we'll remove the paper backings off the sticky pads. And then, we'll need to place the board near the top left corner of the Panthera. I personally placed it somewhere with enough clearance to access the hinge and the PCB housing just in case. Once you're satisfied with the placement, we can now add the 5-pin connector that was originally connected to the stick into the SOCD board. Additionally, we'll also need to install the red and black power cable that we installed to the main board earlier on. You'll need to orient the small end of the power cable so that the red wire is on top and black is on bottom. Alternatively, the red wire will be closer to the 5-pin connector. Next up, we'll need to make sure that the SOCD board is grounded. It's hard to see in the video, but I've screwed in the ground cable to the left hinge of the pad. Here's a photo for more detail. After that's done, we'll start wiring up the directional cables into the respective buttons. Once again, red is for down, orange for up, yellow for left, and green for right. The pins of the black wire will go into each respective directional button. For ease of installation, you're going to want to have the furthest end inserted into the up button. We're just on the home stretch. We can now finally wire up the action buttons. You should have a color label shown right beside the panel hinge, so for simplicity's sake, you can just follow that chart. For myself, I didn't like how the original layout had the R1 and R2 buttons on the left side of the L1 and L2 buttons, so I swapped the wiring to suit. Going this route actually matches the layout of the Hitbox controller. I've included this photo so you get a sense of what your final wiring should look like. Feel free to pause. And with that out of the way, we can finally close the Panthera, and you can now try it out. Okay, we're gonna try out how this controller functions in game. Why don't we start with some Dragon Ball? Square, triangle, reflect works, heavy. Okay, manual air dash works, super dash works, floating works, the SD macro is working, Dragon Rush is working. Let's do some combos. Okay. Drop that one. Overall, it's working though. I do hear some squeaking. One of the buttons. It might be my bracelet though. Do some other combos. That's working fine. Yeah. Let's see if we can pull this one off. Nope. Will it hit? No! Couldn't make it. That's okay. It's working though. Okay, I can re-jump with Gogeta. Do the other re-jump. I can do the other re-jump. Okay. Okay, Vanish is working. Oh, I dropped that. It's all working though. So yeah, looks like it's all working. Anyway, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. That's the end of the video. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. If you have any other questions, just leave it down in the comments, all right? Have a good one. Peace.